Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Hospitality TV. I'm your host, Rafael Peterson. If this is your first time tuning in, thank you so much for joining. This is a show that was created from within the industry for the industry. The goal here is to interview a bunch of amazing people, leaders in the industry, try to extract their best practices and experiences so that we can be better at what we do. By default, the people around us are better at what they do, and we can spread that energy. And one thing I ask is that if this show provides you with any value whatsoever, is that you please share the show. The more people that see it, the more exposure it gets, and the more people we can help. That being said, our guest today, Mr. Nate Rivera. How you doing, sir?
Good, man. Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Raf. It's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for your patience in getting set up. I really appreciate it. I know we've been talking about doing this for a minute, so I'm glad we finally got the chance to do it.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
So I was looking over a little bit of your history and your background in the industry. Dude, you're a lawyer?
Well,
what are you doing here? How'd you end up in the industry?
No, it's a long story. You got time for it?
Oh yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I was on this track, man. I was on this track to be an attorney. Like I wanted to be a prosecutor. It's why I went to law school. Went to law school down here at Cal Western, actually, right here in downtown San Diego.
Okay.
And I was interning with the DA's office for like 2 years. Down in up in San Bernardino. I was in the homicide division, and that was the goal. That's why after undergrad, I went to law school, and I always wanted to be of service to the community in like this higher level form. And at least so I believed at the time. And it was I graduated law school 2011, and we're just coming out of this like great recession, right? And no one was hiring, like nobody. I thought I'd have a job in with the government. And my wife and I had our daughter, our third year in law school.
Congrats.
Yeah, no, it was great. It was great. Very stressful at the time.
I bet.
But I had to provide for the family. No one was going to do it for me. And all my friends who had graduated with their JDs were doing, they were working for free. I mean, they were literally working for free just to get experience so they can compete to get an entry-level job at some, small law firm or the government. Luckily, I had a ton of hospitality experience. So I quickly transitioned to going back into it so I can provide for the family. I ended up taking a job as a F&B manager at the Plaza Hotel in Monterey.
Okay.
And that was like kind of that transition point.
That's so interesting.
To go right into hospitality.
Yeah.
The law was still in the back burner, but the field was just so, it was so volatile at that point. Everything was volatile at that point.
Do you remember why initially that you wanted to get into law?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was I wanted to be honestly of service. Like I think we all kind of search for this higher purpose in life. Like, why are we here? Like, what are we doing?
Mm-hmm.
And I always thought like to impact the world in the way that I wanted to impact it, and the people in the way I wanted to impact people, it had to be at the legal level. And I learned very quickly, and this will probably come out in this podcast, that the way that I wanted to impact people maybe was through food and beverage and hospitality rather than the law at all. So
that's so interesting that you had that calling at such a young age.
Mm-hmm.
Right? A lot of people find their calling a lot later in life, I feel like.
Yeah. No, I can't say it like it just happened instantaneously.
Sure.
Like it took a while to get there. When I was going to UCSB, that's where I did my undergrad in Santa Barbara. I wanted to do like financials. I wanted to, work in big corporate business. But I think at some point, just being of service became very, very important to me. And I think that's ultimately what kept me and what's steered me into hospitality. Is I felt like to be most impactful and to be able to give people what I really hoped. I think we're able to do it every day in the four walls of our restaurants and our wine bars, right? And just feel very privileged to be part of that now.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so you took a job. Please continue with the background. So you took a job in F&B.
Yeah, so I took a job back in F&B, kind of trying to ride out this like volatile economy back in 2011.
Yep.
Moved my wife and my daughter up to Monterey. Long, typical hours, huge resort, right? So you're working those 70-hour work weeks. But all my family, all my friends, they were down here in San Diego or in Temecula area. And we're always looking to get back. So a job opportunity opened up at a winery in Temecula. I ended up taking like a beverage manager position, a wine educator position for them, just to kind of get us back. Gosh, it was such a tumultuous time during that time. It kind of seems like a blur, but one of my friends from law school back in like 2014 There used to be a very large employer here in town called Bridgepoint Education. They owned Ashford University, Rockies. I think at the time they were maybe like the third or fourth largest, provider of employment in this entire county before they moved to Arizona. So they needed help in their compliance department. So I actually, my buddy Rob, who I graduated law school with, I ended up working in their compliance department, pretty much defending the university's interests against the Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights, Iowa School Board Commission. But my job was really more on the corporate side, which was hard for me, to be honest with you. I always went to law school to get that higher education, almost to champion the small man, right?
Right.
To really provide that service to, at least at the time when I believe, that service that
Right.
I wanted to give to everyone. And I feel like education was always such a motivating kind of elevating thing for me. And my interest in the university was to literally defend corporate interests against students that were filing claims with, the Office of Civil Rights or, the Department of Education. And my job was to essentially
squash it.
Yeah,
make them go away.
Make them go away, right?
Yeah.
Which was tough. So fast forward, I feel like, I think there came a point where I decided I didn't want to do this. Like, this is not why I got into the law or wanted to pursue law at all. All that time, I hadn't taken the bar exam in California yet. We're going to come back to Temecula. I was going to take the bar exam out there. My wife and I wanted to open up Temecula Valley Law Group. We wanted to kind of raise Charlotte there, our daughter. But it's not like you just, hang a shingle and boom, you have a ton of clients. So
Right.
at the time, I was serving tables at a winery called Leoness. I was officiating weddings. I must have done like 40 weddings that year. And I had heard like there was a small concept in Old Town Temecula opening called the Goat and Vine. That's supposed to have this like killer pizza program and sandwiches and a cool little international wine list. And I remember just applying there. Like I needed money. I needed to support the family. I thought it was going to be a temporary thing. And I actually started on with the Goat and Vine as a server over 9 years ago. And it's turned out to be maybe the most amazing thing that's ever happened in my life. Yeah.
Wow. So who were the original owners?
So Brad and Alicia Trevithick, they owned Great Harvest Bakery, which it was a franchise there in Temecula. They have over 200 across the country.
Okay.
But Brad and Alicia have their background in teaching. They're also commercial builders up in Alaska. So I remember walking in that day for that interview, right?
Yeah.
Alicia's behind the bar. She's like hanging purse hooks underneath the bar. And Brad was, I think, doing some carpentry. He comes out. He has this gigantic beard, man. I'm talking like beard down to like maybe the top of his belly button, right? And I'm rolling in like looking like an attorney, right? I have this like black pinstripe suit, this pocket square, matching tie, this like beautiful brown leather Bosca bag. And I remember walking through those doors and we both locked eyes at each other. And we couldn't have been more different, right? Like we could not have been more different. And I remember thinking like, man, I don't know if this is going to work out. Like, but let's sit for this interview anyways. And we actually sat there, which is now Two Travelers Wine Bar, but it was Goat and Vine at the time. We sat there and we talked for 2 hours. And he's pretty much asking me like, why do you want to work here, man? Like you just finished law school. Like I thought you wanted to be an attorney. Like, what are you even doing here, essentially?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I'm just explaining to him like the position and period in time in my life where I was at, right? And I'd always loved hospitality, but at the time, the Goat and Vine was kind of, it was during that transitional period where I thought, hey, we're going to go all after this law firm thing, and it's so crazy, like what life, what God, what.
When you applied there, you still thought that you were going to do the law firm?
100%.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, no.
So it was going to be a temporary thing while you do this over here?
100%. Yeah,
Gotcha.
I had like 3 temporary jobs at that time.
Gotcha.
While
okay.
we're trying to like pursue and open up this business. And I still had to study to take the California State Bar exam, right?
Right.
And, the Goat and Vine then at the time, it started just pumping, man. We opened the doors, it started pumping. The product was amazing. I think timing in which it opened in Temecula was just so advantageous for growth in that community. And it started pumping. And I would say in about 6 months, we realized like it had legs. And Brad and Alicia were looking for a full-time manager to really kind of come in there and and take that concept to, grow that concept and hopefully allow it to, be profitable and have longevity in it. And they knew that I had a ton of experience in management, right? I'd managed in Santa Barbara, I'd managed in Monterey, I'd managed down here in San Diego. And they asked me, hey, do you want to be the GM at the time, right? And I remember still going home and talking to my wife about it. And she was like, why would you want to go back to this? Like you've done all the schooling, you took out hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt just to finish all that education. But man, something about it just felt right. I'd never been in a restaurant before where it felt like the community, right? Our sense of why, like the culture component, right? It felt like nothing I've actually ever been a part of before. And the decision was so easy. So at that time, I chose to like not practice law, not pursue law anymore, and jump in headfirst, Goat and Vine. And that was 9 years ago, right? So I started there as a server, and now like I sit here with you, and I'm one of the owners in it, right?
Yeah.
And it's just so cool to have that trajectory and to find a place that would even allow me those kind of opportunities.
Right.
I think so many of us like. We want that, right?
100%. I think it's unique. You don't see that a lot.
Yeah.
And I wish you saw that more. Obviously, it's not something that all owners can give out to everybody, right? They can't just hand out equity all over the place. But I'm curious to see, so you were talking about how you went back into GM and you were going to dive into that head first.
Yeah.
And then you talked to ownership. How did that come across?
Yeah.
So did they ask you if you wanted to be a part and offer you equity? I mean, if that's something we can talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. We can talk about it, man. No, at first it was... it was just kind of GM salary and kind of like, let's see what you can do, right? Like, let's see what you can do. Because at the time, like, we were still working on bringing all the systems into this small concept, building protocols, right? Large batching the product, like really kind of bringing it to market. And the brand and the product and the profit levels ultimately kept growing and growing and growing. Team kept growing. And there's a lot of positivity that I think was coming out of that concept.
Yeah.
And I would say within 6 months, I became a partner there. So not actually like an owner yet, but a profit sharing partner who shared in the profit if there was any.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a lot. I'll disclose to you at this during this, but it was maybe around 5% profit share, I would say, of what we actually made at that time. And I mean, we took that concept from, maybe 300,000 to 800,000 to 2 million to 2.5 million. And I mean, and it's the size. I mean, I don't know if you've been to the original location, but
where Two Travelers is now.
Where Two Travelers is currently, right?
Yes.
I mean, the actual floor space in this place is, maybe 1,700 square feet. So this thing pumped. I mean, we run 3-hour waits routinely every day. I mean, it was nuts. It was nuts. So
what do you think was the biggest reason for that growth?
Yeah, I think
for such explosion. I mean, those are huge numbers and doubling and tripling, and
that's right, and especially in such a short period of time. I mean, that growth happened within 2.5 years. You know, so I think you have to start out with just incredible food, right? We make everything from scratch. Like I'm talking everything. Our culinary, our operational team comes in every day at 3 a.m. It's always been like that. The pretzel bread's made from scratch. The sourdough's made from scratch. The pita, the pizza. All of our sauces, all of our dressings, right? Like the product has to be great first.
Yeah.
And it's phenomenal, right? I think the next big piece is the people part, right? I think Brad and Alicia at the very beginning are very good at hiring people who are just good people, right? Who are just, they understand the industry, but they genuinely want to take care of people. They genuinely want to serve people, right? And they have that heart of a servant kind of approach. I think that was a big piece in our growth. And I think the other part, which we touched on briefly earlier, was just the timing, right? I think timing is so important. One of my favorite podcasts that I also watch is or listen to is How We Built This with Guy Raz, right?
Yep, I love that one.
I love that one, right? And he always asks, one of my favorite questions he always asks is like, is your success, have to do with your hard work or is it luck, right? And I always think, well, man, if I'm on that podcast, how would I answer that, right? And I always say, like, man, a lot of it's luck because I think you have to work hard, right? Like you have to. Like you can never even get an opportunity if you're not working hard. You're not putting in like all the reps, right? You're not You're not following, all of the leads. Like you have to work hard. That's a given. That's just open the door.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people think that hard work's enough, and it's not. There has to be like an element of luck or timing
Mm-hmm.
that ultimately also like propels you to be able to grow a concept and a brand. And I
Right.
think part of Goat and Vine's growth was it had great timing in Temecula and in the marketplace.
That's amazing. Because everybody wants to know what the secret sauce is for that, right? Everybody's trying to grow their business. That's the thing that fixes everything, right?
Right.
If you have the volume that's coming through the door, like all your problems go away. Like, we always hear that in restaurants. Like you're always struggling. When it's busy, you're not worried about labor, right? When it's
course.
busy, you have a lot more flexibility and kind of buffer to operate. Congrats on all the success. I think that's amazing. And I've been to both locations now in their current locations, and have had great experiences at both of them. And I think that says a lot. And that's one of the reasons why I want to talk to you today, because I just love seeing places that I think people seem to be authentically having a good time working there.
Yeah.
So I think that says a lot. So actually, I wanted to jump back to something you said before. I think for somebody who really doesn't know, and maybe might be in that position of partnership, points from profit, or actually getting equity in the business, or being an owner, maybe you could talk quickly about what those mean. If somebody is in a general manager position and they're maybe on the verge of getting an offer like that, kind of what that means, how you would differentiate them, and then kind of I would love to hear what your experience was moving between those different stages.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So in the partnership track, at least traditionally, you are usually in a general manager position or a director of operations position.
Yep.
You're sharing in the profits, right? Either on a monthly basis or quarterly basis based on like P&L performance. And after all the liabilities, expenses are paid, right? There's maybe the small amount of money left, and based on your percentage of partnership, you share in those, right?
Right.
But I think the big distinguishing factor is if you walk away, right? Like you get hired on, you get recruited by somebody else, you get nothing, right? You leave and you get nothing. It's just like it's almost like a bonus structure, if you will, in this partnership.
Is it fair if somebody's in that position looking to see if I'm about to get some partnership points in the business, to ask how many people are also within that getting a slice of that pie? Because I'm sure if there's a bunch of people who are getting points, then that gets diluted, right?
I think that's a fair question for sure, right? Because you want to know whether, before you sign on, whether, like how much of this pie am I actually going to be sharing with other people? So absolutely.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, 100%. Back to your question too, like how did that transition for me?
Mm-hmm.
Man, I think that the restaurant...
Well, I guess before you could talk about that, if you don't mind, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
So you talk about partnership points and what that means, and then maybe define if there's a difference between equity and ownership.
I would say for us, no.
Okay.
For us, we have a certain amount of shares in the business. If you own the shares, you have equity in it, and you are then an owner in it.
Gotcha.
So but we've constructed our S corp like that, though.
Right.
And in that case, right, you do have, liability in the business, right? You're also an owner, you get a share in the profits, but you also have all the responsibilities of being an owner as well, right? And there's plenty, for sure. And you don't get to see all those at first when you're on the other side. It looks like gravy, right? It looks like, man, the owners are popping in, they have all this, great flexibility, they must be making a ton of money. Let me tell you, like, it's not at all what it seems.
Right.
And I always tell people too, it's like when you're an employee, like you always get paid first, right? Every single one of our employees gets paid before I do.
Right.
Gets paid before Brad does. Gets paid before Alicia does. And I'd say too, just with the way that inflation has hit, rising food costs, employment costs, right? Space, everything, right? The margins are just shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. So I would say there's a lot better ways to make money in the world than in food. You generally have to love it and be a part of it like every single day. I try to be an owner that's like in the operations, that's there for the team, right? There for management. I would say one great thing for those that are looking to open up their own space, it does allow you the opportunity to carry forth your vision, right? Like what you really want to contribute to the world, what you want to contribute to this industry. And the losses are on your shoulders, but so are the wins, and that kind of freedom is pretty nice.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting point, because I've know a couple of groups that offer that type of structure also that you can lead into that. If you work as a general manager in this restaurant group, you have an opportunity to work towards getting maybe a profit share or even a part of ownership in the business. Really looking at the top leadership level, right, from the operations team. But even at that level, I think that's amazing because then it allows people to actually take stake in the business and they really care for it. And you take ownership of what you're doing, right? Where sometimes if you don't have that, it's harder to find people who will maybe connect in that way, right?
100%. And I think that's a really great point. I think that's part of our philosophy, even in growing the business forward. I think you want to bring people in that have a real vested interest in the business, financially, right? But also their time, their sweat equity, right? That they're putting into it, all their, the years of studying, right? All their schooling, all their sommelier exams, all their experience on the floor, managing people, like all that really brings added value to the business, right? So you find certain people that, man, you want to make sure they stay with you, right? But you want to incentivize them and you want to reward them too for those contributions, right? There's only so much money like you need to make, right? As an individual, there's only so much that you really need, right? I think that, I think you really should. I think part of the help or the growth and the things that feel good about the business is really investing in helping others reach that same level of satisfaction in their job, but also like, what kind of money they want to make, what kind of, what kind of contributions they want to make to this industry, what kind of life they want to live. I think part of our philosophy is that, when you're talking about growth and you're talking about, management and equity, in the role that, that I'm not the last one, that, ever is going to go from GM to partner to owner. Like I'm just the first one. Right. So as the business continues to grow, we find the right people that are invested in that way.
How do you do that?
Yeah, that's man. If we could figure that out, I think we'd have a pretty nice business on our hands. I think there's been a big shift, and we've all seen it. And it's not just in hospitality or in food, right, or in wine. It's in every business. My wife actually owns her own law firm now, and she sees it in the law as well. Where after the pandemic, we had this shift, this mindset shift, right? Where I think we started valuing different things for our lives and our culture, right? Where maybe we're a little more content to make less money, right? To maybe have less successes on paper if we have more successes in life, right? With our family, with our friends, pursuing some of our interests that maybe don't monetize in the classic way. So that has created a little bit of disruption, I feel like, in finding those people that maybe would still want to invest their time and their skill sets to earn that partnership equity track. Because at the end of the day, it is a business, right? It does have to make profit. We do provide a lot of jobs for people, right? We need somebody to help us keep growing that business,
right?
While still balancing, like, the interests and where we're at currently in society, right? And I think we talked about it before even the camera started rolling, where we have lost, a lot of talent, to other industries that won't come back to hospitality because the hours are long, you're working weekends, evenings, holidays. And you can make maybe the same amount of money in another field, but you're working remotely and you have far more flexibility with your time and more time for your family. So we are on the lookout right now for those people that do want to invest the same way that maybe you and I invested, a long time ago, 10 years ago, when 70-hour work weeks were the norm, right? I mean, that doesn't even happen anymore. It can't, right? I think, and like I said, there's a lot of positive that came out of that. I feel like we want to achieve more of that balance, right? None of our managers work more than 45 hours a week. Everyone's more like 40, 45.
Yeah.
But I do know in my experience to really grow and develop something new, there will be plenty of times where you are putting in those long, long hours.
Yeah.
And you have to find the people that are willing to do it, at least for that season. When it's time to harvest, you harvest,
yes.
right?
There's a season where you have to put in that work, for sure.
Of course.
What you were saying about the work, the hours that people put in during a work week, is that still true for the back of the house in your establishments?
Yes.
Because I always find that's like the trickiest one, right? Like I have a lot of friends in the industry as well, and we've all been through it, that you have these extended hours that you work. And sometimes I feel like it's a little bit more manageable for front of the house to kind of move the pieces around. Although I still have a lot of friends who are putting in those 10, 12-hour days. And in my mind, I'm like, how is that still a thing? That's not a sustainable rhythm. And you're going to burn out. And we see it, you're just exhausted. You're just tired. And not to mention that you're giving so much to a company. And I feel like I do see some places that, just like you're saying, that have managed to move the pieces around a little bit so that they don't, maybe there's an opening manager and a closing manager, or maybe there's a lead server who can come in and do the opening duties, or whatever it looks like, right? But still, I feel like notoriously, I still see a lot of chefs who are in bigger positions that are still working those hours for sure. And I just feel, I'm like, man, that is, it's such a brutal schedule.
Yeah.
And it's not sustainable. It's not healthy. It leads to a lot of burnout, or they switch,
That's right. Yeah. And I think that goes right to what we were kind of speaking of before. There's a time and a place to like work that hard, right? And that used to be the expectation in our industry, right? It's like you couldn't call out, right? You had to put in the 70-hour work weeks, or you didn't deserve a place on the team.
Right.
But that transitioned during, I think, over the last 4 years. So we did get a lot of benefits for overall balance, right? This quote unquote balance in life. And yeah, I think we've done our best, but it has been a slow progress, to be honest with you. We did have some chefs as part of the Goat and Vine Inc. That would put in long hours, right? Like really, really long hours, and always try to encourage them to keep building your teams, like keep finding the people around you so that you don't have to be in here like every single day, right? Like you don't have to be the one always making pizzas, always making the sauces, like. You have to be able to build your team. Even to this day, like I don't look for people that, are the best at, wine, or the best in culinary, or, really I'm trying to find people that are like the best with people, right? This is people business, right? And part of being the best with people is also like being able to manage, your own expectations, right? You're being able to manage like your own life as well. And part of that is knowing like, when you've kind of hit your limitations, right? Like, you know what, this is not a healthy place for me anymore to be here 60 hours a week. I need to take some time off, and I need to, go to the beach, or, go to the mountains, or do those things that kind of make you happy as well. So I think we have been successful maybe over the last 2 years at moving our back of the house leadership to, these 40, 45-hour work weeks. And it wasn't always like that. It definitely wasn't. I used to always tell our CDC and our chefs, right? Man, just like stick with it, like keep putting in the work, right? Like you're gonna have to build your team around you, but like don't leave, right? Like I see it so often in our industry where people will work, they'll get burnt out, right? And they'll leave, they'll get frustrated, right? They think the grass is like always greener somewhere else. But in my experience and from what I've seen, and I've been in the industry over 25 years now, the grass is always greener where you water it, like always, man. And I always try to impress that upon like our leadership team, because what happens is if you're grinding, you're putting in those long, long hours, and you leave, someone else is just going to slide right in and like stand on that hill of all that work that you put in, right? All that time, everything that you built in the business, right? Some of the most successful people that I know in any industry, not just this one, they stick with it. They stay in one place, they build into the business, and they get the life that they've always wanted, right? They get able to contribute the way they've always wanted to contribute. But it does take like that resiliency, right? Because there's plenty of times where you do get frustrated with like those long hours and, the setbacks and the disappointment. But I always just try to encourage our leadership teams to stay with it. It'll get there. But you got to have ownership too, that believe in that too. You have to. It has to come down from the very, very top that, you want that balance for your team as well. Because I have seen, like I said, we've been guilty of it as well, where you have members of your team that are putting those long hours, and, resentment grows, and, maybe productivity falls, right? And it's just not healthy for anybody at that point. So,
God, that was gold, man. No, it really is, because I think that that's such a crucial conversation to have. And one of those things is even being honest with yourself upfront, and being where you are now. Like if you're happy doing what you're doing, if you feel like you need to leave, I think is taking a moment to assess where you're at. I think it's having clarity with the expectations that you have in your job as well. I think sometimes we can bring on a lot of unneeded stress onto ourselves, wanting a situation to be different that was never meant to be different. Like it was, that's what you signed up for.
Right.
That's the job that you're supposed to be doing. So how can you do that to the best of the ability? versus, I don't know, finding things that add stress and that you maybe want a promotion that you're not getting, or you want more money that you're not receiving. And well, how do you work towards that, right? Instead of just complaining about it and maybe, or feeling that you should get this, well, just having a clearer conversation with leadership team or ownership team on like, what are my direct pathways to get to this goal that I think is going to provide me a little bit more happiness and maybe a little bit more wiggle room in my own personal life. And it's important to have that conversation. And if you don't have, first of all, if you don't have the conversation, you're just creating stress and anxiety for yourself for no reason. Then if you do have the conversation and it's still a little bit murky on how to get there, then that's probably not a good place for you to go. I think then you need to take an assessment. Like, maybe I should go somewhere else.
Right.
But hopefully you have an owner or a leadership team that will listen to you and help you define what that path looks like, and then you can work towards it. But being in that kind of no man's land right in the middle of like, I need this or that, I need more money, we need more money in the tip pool, or this and that, without like a clear solution of maybe how to get there is not good for anybody.
That's right.
And I think that, just like what you said, I think there has to be also a certain level of accountability, on what your goal is and how you can manage to get there.
No, I love that, Raf. And I think you hit on a really important point too, just in the communication part. And I've always said, like, bad communication ends a lot of good relationships, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just being able to be an effective communicator is like such a key skill to have in any business, right? But especially this one, because I think, you do put in those long hours. You are giving your heart, your soul to like everything that you do every single day, right? Not just in the product that you serve and put together, but in the people, the interactions, right? Like your team, the guests. And, I know I personally always really appreciate, the team members that come up to me. Hey, Nate, like, I'd love to sit down with you, right? I'd love to meet with you and talk about X, Y, Z. Actually, even in my schedule to this day, I keep open these like office hours, like every week, like 2 or 3 days a week. You can come in at this time, and you can come talk to me about anything at all, right? Like anything.
I love that.
And we'll sit down and we'll talk about it. And most of the time it's about work, but sometimes it's just like, hey, I want to talk about, this in life. I'm having trouble doing X, Y, Z, right? But the communication portion is such a big part of success that I always like to kind of leave those doors open as well.
Yeah. Who do you think has been the most influential to you in your career in hospitality?
Man, honestly, like, I mean, there's some big, factors, big people out there that I think are influential to us all, right? Like Danny Meyer and, definitely Bobby Stuckey. There's a lot about his way of hospitality and leadership that I love as well. But man, probably the most impactful people in my life have been like my two business partners, honestly, like Brad and Alicia. And a lot of that has just been giving me the opportunity and believing in me that I can bring something to the table that helps us grow the business, and offering, a path towards ownership in like this great company. But I think even more so, it kind of showed me a different way to think, to be quite frank with you. I'd always just grown up in this household that in order to be successful, right, you either had to be a doctor or an attorney. Those were like the pinnacles of success. And my parents, they always worked very, very hard. They had very classic jobs where my mom was a preschool teacher, worked for UCR for 30 years, got her pension. My dad was a Marine that eventually became, worked for the IRS, got his pension, right? And I always thought that was my trajectory, right? Like, well, I'll also work for the government, right? And I will work really hard for 30 years and I will get paid decent and I'll get my pension and I'll retire. And I still have a lot of friends that do that. And that's a really admirable work. And I always thought that was the way that my career would go as well. Until I met them. They think differently. I think for the first time in my life, I saw how true entrepreneurs think. And it almost like sets you free, to be honest. Where, that path is not so certain. There's a lot of uncertainty in it, but the freedom to be able to choose it is the empowering part of it. So in many ways, they challenged me to change how I think in business and in life. I remember even when I first started with Goat and Vine, before we opened Two Travelers Wine Bar, right, or the Nightingale, I was talking to him how I'm starting to save for like my daughter Charlotte to go to college, right, in this California 529 plan. And I'm putting X amount of dollars in every single month, right? And they're like, you're saving all that money for her to go to college, which is great. But what about if you saved all that money in a non-educational account, like a CD or some kind of bonds, right? and you save that for her to open her own business instead, and just even hearing that, which is so foreign because it's like, well, of course you got to go to college. Of course you got to do this classic way to be successful, right? So just throughout our business relationship, they've been very impactful in my life to like how I even approach problems now or situations or opportunities, right? I look at them maybe not as conventionally as I had before. So they've been incredibly impactful.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing to have those people in your life.
Yeah, for
Not
sure.
everybody has that.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So looking back on the opening of Two Travelers Wine Bar, so the location where it's at now, that's pretty recent, right?
The Goat and Vine.
Yes.
That's correct. Yeah, we transitioned there 2020 January, about 6 weeks prior to the pandemic.
Oh my God.
We had another. Yeah, it was brutal, man.
Yeah.
It was brutal. We had another restaurant there prior called the Nightingale, which was a pretty nice, very, very service focused. Lots of. I mean, closest thing I can compare it to down here in San Diego would be it's kind of like an urban wood vibe, but in downtown Temecula, or Old Town Temecula. Ultimately, it didn't make it right financially. It just never really quite penciled. And we made the very, very hard decision, very painful decision at the time, to be honest, of having to close that thing down, and the dream of, charting that for our community, all of our interest in wine and food, and, having to face that reality of like, this just is not working. We need to close it down. And, it was scary for us to move the Goat and Vine over there. We had this great little concept that was doing so well in this corner. I'm talking 3-hour waits, 4-hour waits every day. It had been nothing but growth since day one, almost exponential, it seemed like. But sometimes you remove a place from its physical existence and you lose all the juju, you lose all the magic. So we were very, very, scared to move it. That's like everything we had.
Yeah.
But it's honestly turned out to be maybe the biggest blessing of our life. Like, we moved it over to current location, which was Old Nightingale location. Doubled the size of the team, doubled our sales, and expanded the reach of the brand. We're maybe even now positioning ourselves to open up more of them down the road. So,
yeah. So then obviously in that space, you put in the Two Travelers Wine Bar.
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So congrats. That spot is beautiful.
Oh, thanks, man. Thanks.
Yeah. I mean, I always see a bunch of people who are tagging pictures up there, and it looks incredible. I see what I really like too is I see you're always pouring blinds for people too, which is really cool. I think it's kind of helping people in their education. They know it's a place that they can go and learn from people and be challenged, and also part of the community and growing and learning.
Right.
I love that you do that. That's also obviously only been within a year and a half, I think, right?
Yeah. So
it actually opened.
That's right. We just celebrated our year anniversary. I think about a couple weeks ago.
Oh, congrats!
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
So I love asking this question because I think there's a lot of learnings there, and I know you're pretty new in the new location with the new wine bar, but obviously slightly different concept, I guess, than the other restaurant.
Right.
But if you can go back to 6 months prior to your opening date to the wine bar, what were some things that you would tell yourself? What have been some learnings in this time?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's, there have been several for sure. Especially when you're trying to chart something brand new to a community, right? Like, we've only kind of in Temecula have had tasting rooms. There's lots of tasting rooms in the community, but like a real wine bar that can, stand, on its own in larger cities like San Diego or Seattle or New York, right? We really wanted to bring like a world-class wine bar experience to our community. And I would say the challenging parts have been how do we consistently get people in there to really buy into that experience, right? I think we've learned that, unlike the Goat and Vine or unlike restaurants where people need to go in and eat and they have to, have sustenance to live and survive, for a wine bar, you almost have to give them a reason to be there, right? What's the reason to be here? What's the why, right? So there are tasting events, right? There are pairing dinners. There are educational classes on certain regions, right? And I think that's helped out immensely. And I'd also say, Raf, from just a practical perspective, right? You visit all these wine bars in LA or San Diego or these large cities, right? And it looks so fun, right? It looks so sexy. People behind the bar pouring these gorgeous producers, right? Having these, it's dimly lit, right? It's ambient, it's glowing, and it looks easy and fun, right? And that's what you see.
Yep.
But you don't see the 20 cases of wine that just came in. You're just, lugging them around the wine bar, stocking the shelves, keeping meticulous inventory of everything you have, working off of razor thin margins, right? You don't see all the wine education, like the work that goes on behind the scenes, right? All you see is like the very, very fun part of like this really sexy environment at night where you're pouring just this world-class wine and you're talking to all the beautiful people, and it looks very fun. And believe me, like that part is fun. Of course,
Sure, right,
of course
right.
that part's fun, right?
Yeah.
But there is a very business-oriented aspect behind the scenes. And I'll tell you that in wine bars, the margins are smaller, right? The luxury is that you're curating through your knowledge, like this product for your community, and you're flipping that, right? But the food sales aren't as high, right? You don't have liquor sales there,
Right.
so you do have to be successful at it. You really have to be able to manage your labor costs really, really well. You have to make sure that you negotiate your lease up front really, really well. And you have to be pretty active in it. We're even thinking about launching a wine club, right, here shortly for our customers that come in. But I want it to be good. I want it to be like really, really good before we launch something like that. But you do have to be creative in that space for sure.
And that's great that I remember when you and I were talking several months ago, you were like, the community has received us really well. Like they're very excited to have this wine bar. And I think a lot of people, obviously, you think of Temecula and you think of the local wineries, and it's always about drinking the local wine.
Right.
But now to have the opportunity where you can, you have a world-class wine bar to turn people on to new things.
Yeah.
It seemed like that was going really well.
It has been. Yeah. And I think the wine bar has exceeded our expectations. Maybe not our hopes, but like our expectations for sure. And it's given us a lot of encouragement to be able to continue, really pioneering this wine program in a community, maybe even a county that doesn't have anything quite like that yet, right?
Yeah.
I think there's this like hometown feel to where we are in Temecula, and like I'm proud of that in many respects. Like that is our community. It's been great to us. This is where we're from, right? We're not trying to be anything else that we're not, right?
Yeah.
But there is this allegiance, right? This to Temecula wine country and to Temecula wines. And like I said, I think there's a lot of positive that comes out of that. But we also want to be able to bring our community something different. The world of wine is big, right? And there's a lot of great producers. There's a lot of great regions to explore, right? And we're working very purposefully and very diligently to try to expose people to that, right? And there are some producers, I'll say, there's some producers in Temecula Valley, right, that are doing it very well, at least in terms philosophically, what we try to promote, right?
Well, let's talk about that. Okay,
Sure.
So let's talk, because you're local, know the spots.
Yeah.
What are the areas who are the producers that we should be focusing on right now in Temecula?
Yeah.
Either for wine and or the experience that they provide, right? Because I think that you were saying that a little bit too. The hospitality that they provide.
I think there's both, man.
Yeah.
I think there's both. We'll touch on the wine side, and sometimes the wine and the experience maybe blend, right?
Yes.
So super excited about, there's a producer called Made by Light up in Duluth.
Oh, yeah.
And super
Mr.
excited.
Mark Phelan?
Yeah,
shout
of
out.
course. Yeah. Shout out to Mark. Yeah. I super excited about what they're doing up there, right up in Duluth. Really kind of just trying to do low intervention, like organic kind of producing, composting. We had the opportunity to go up to their vineyard site, and just so impressed, man, by their philosophy in the winemaking process, right? Because I think for such a long time, and I think what's given Temecula maybe somewhat of a bad rap is that it's always been a place where big giant tour buses come in, and it's bridal showers, it's bachelor and bachelorette parties, and it's been a place of party, but not necessarily wine quality, right? We're starting to see that change, right? Another really great producer that I'm excited about, Joe Wiens, actually has started his own flagship vineyard and maybe soon to be winery in a couple of years, called the Lost Ranch, and they are focusing on regenerative farming practice, biodynamic, wines out in that area of Temecula, where they might not even spray SO2 on the grapes, right? And we're talking like really, really trying to do it philosophically, at least where we're kind of aligned with at Two Travelers. So it's just exciting to see, and I try to promote those producers that are trying to move Temecula more toward that very low intervention style of winemaking.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Amazing. So something I wanted to jump back to is you said the people that had influenced you were some of the old school New Yorker guys, right? Out of hospitality, like Paul Greco and Danny Meyer and some of these guys.
Yeah.
They were the classics, man. I mean, those are definitely the same ones that, influenced me. I think we're probably from the same generation. And I mean, do you find that people are coming into the restaurant, like the younger generation, that they're knowing who these people are? I mean, I feel like there's at this point, maybe they're looking at a different type of inspiration. I guess my question is, who do you think that they're drawing their inspiration from now, the younger generation that's coming into the workforce now?
Man, that's a really good question.
Yeah.
Because, I would say like maybe in our generation, we were maybe more students of the craft, right? Students of the business. We wanted to know, from Danny, right? Almost like it's gospel, from Bobby, right?
Right.
But I would say...
Well, there was such a huge aspect of hospitality ingrained in that.
Right.
Like once you learn that aspect, I think that was what was very welcoming for people. And I think that attracted a lot of people from our generation to that. I think the desire, going back to what you originally said, of wanting to become a lawyer, was having to be in service for people and to be able to provide a good experience for them. And I think that that's what... attracts a lot of people to the industry. I mean, even Bobby Stuckey, we used to say, we're just a bunch of misfits, just a bunch of guys who are running around, that we're able to find this thing that we all love, and we're able to provide a great sense of belonging to others. And maybe a lot of us didn't have that. And also that's a reason why now you're longing to give that to someone, right?
Right.
And I think that was so interesting when they would approach it from that aspect. The other thing that obviously that Danny Meyer would pitch was, the kind of the hierarchy of how they would deliver hospitality, and starting from within and then leading out, right? So almost to the point where the customers were some of the last people that are actually getting taken care of, because you take care of yourselves and your own crew so well that by default the customer will be taken care of.
Right.
And I think that you miss that in a lot of places, and I don't know, it just feels different these days. I don't want to sound negative, but it doesn't feel like in a lot of restaurants, like you walk in and people are, they're on their phone, and you're lucky to get a hello from the hostess. And of course, that's not everywhere, and a lot of people are doing it the right way. I'm just curious more as to, do you continue to try to teach from like the old school people that inspired us, or are you looking now of kind of a more kind of like an alternative version of that, to where you've created your own kind of new school that you can teach to people?
Yeah, no, that's man, a lot of great points there. And this is something that we roundtable a lot, just myself and Brad and Alicia, on how do we reach these kids, right? Because I do think like maybe the old approach, right? The old guard is maybe not as impactful as it was for myself or for you. And we still struggle with that as a cultural perspective. Like, how do we reach them, right? One of the things that we just started that's actually been going over really, really well. We just started an internal company newsletter, right? Where it's like, we talk about, we hit cultural points, like internal cultural points, right? We have snippets of like, Instagram or, TikTok in there, funny things, right? We make it very interactive, but we still try to push forward like a little bit of, the philosophy too, but we're not necessarily completely immersed in the philosophy. And I think that's been far more impactful, and we've seen far more benefit from like small doses rather than like, hey man, this is an all-in thing. If you're not all in, like you're out then, right? And I think small doses and kind of meeting the team where they're at and listening to them, what ultimately they want, has been has just borne far more fruit. And I think we've been successful in those ways, right? And I think just small engagement, right? We still open up opportunities of, hey, we're going to have this book club. If you'd like to join it, you can, but not necessarily you have to join it, right? Or we're going to do these wine education courses, sampling all these great wines. If you'd like to be there, we'd love to have you, but we're not mandated it anymore, right? And I think that has been different than it was, prior to the pandemic. Yeah.
And I wonder if there's a way to be able to see who the people who are really interested in those type of things up front in the hiring process before you want to offer those things, right? Because I think that helps to really find people who are aligned with your vision versus just, I just want a job and I just want to come here and wait tables and get out of here and take my money, and which is fine. I mean, that's also a big part of the industry,
Right.
But I think that there's also probably a lot of opportunity in that hiring process as well. In that first initial conversation is just like, this is kind of the culture of what we do here, and we really like you to be a part of it. But if it's not for you, then there's no need to join the team. Like if you're not inclined to come to wine education classes or maybe a cooking class or something like this, it's going to kind of improve your own skills in this industry, right? I mean, it kind of sounds. I don't want to sound like being rude about it, but I feel like
Yeah.
there's obviously it should kind of go both ways too, right?
For sure. And we try to do our best in the interview process to find the people that are culturally aligned with us on who maybe have the same values that we do in continuing education, right? Like, I love to hire people that, they spend their free time like going out to different restaurants and, their disposable income that they may have into, trying different spots, right? New spots. And it's hard though, right? Because a lot of time in interviews, people will tell you what they think you want to hear. So we've also part of our hiring process, which I've always done this, and I think it's been really successful. We have a very low attrition rate at both concepts. I mean, one of the biggest complaints we have is that our servers never leave, so no one has the opportunity to kind of move up. We almost have to keep expanding different concepts so people have more opportunities to grow, because I think it's a very positive thing that no one wants to leave, but
Absolutely.
It is also tough when you have great bussers and expos and support that are ready to move up, but they can't, right? I don't want to lose that talent to somebody else.
Right.
But to kind of get back to the initial question, Raf, I think one of the great things we do in the interview process is I'll always interview someone more than once, right? Always. And it's usually to get hired on at Goat and Vine, our two travelers, usually 4 interviews. You'll interview with myself, you'll interview with the GM, you'll interview with like an assistant manager, and then you'll ultimately interview with like the person who is going to be working alongside you. So if you're working with a server, we'll have a server interview you. If you're working with a busser will interview you.
Right.
So ultimately they have the final call on whether you're brought into the team so that they have ownership over your success, right? Like, man, that's my pick. Like I pick Raf, like, I'm going to make sure that he's successful, right? And what I found too in that interview process is like, not everyone even makes it through the 4 interviews. They're like, dude, like, that's too much. I'm not going through all that. Well, then you've already weeded out. There's already attrition naturally, right?
Right.
So ultimately, like the people that make it to the 4th interview, they almost always get hired. It's more of like, let's see who can even get to that point. Right.
Like they really want it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So.
Okay, so I know we got to wrap up. We both have places to go. We have things to do.
Yeah.
But I know, remember when we were talking earlier, I just want to make sure we hit on this because you were mentioning this concept of like what the modern day restaurant is and kind of what it has become, what it means, especially in the context of like social media and how we communicate and how we gather as a society.
Right.
And I just wanted to make sure that we hit on that point before we finish here today, because you were mentioning a couple things that sounded really interesting. And I have a couple things to say about that too. But what does it mean to you? What does the modern restaurant space mean to you these days?
Yeah. No, thanks so much for coming back to that, Raf.
Yeah, of course.
I feel like the modern day restaurant space is like the last place maybe in our like society, right, that we can really connect with one another. I feel like life's greatest moments happen over food and beverage, right? We're just so connected to our phones. We're so connected to social media, to TV, right? That it almost seems like we're becoming, less connected the more connected we are with our electronics, right? But in the restaurant space, like it's such a beautiful thing, right? You see people interacting, you see people like sharing wine, sharing food, laughing, crying, like all the emotions in this space. And we provide that like every day to people, right? We are like the last great connectors in our society, right? And I try to really just impress that upon our team. Like,
I love that.
The responsibility you have, the joy we get out of giving this to people, right? Intentionally, there's no TVs ever in our restaurant spaces, right? We try to discourage phone use in our restaurant spaces, right? Because we really want people to genuinely connect with one another. Once again, right? Before there was all this like electronic stuff that was just pushed into our lives, and it's always so great. Like when you travel overseas, you're in France, right? You're in Spain. You're really anywhere outside of the U.S. Man, people don't have their phones out on the table. They're not in the parks, with their phones. They're not scrolling through the latest like Instagram or Facebook or TikTok feeds, right? They're literally like, they're spending time with their kids, dude. They're spending time with their friends. Like, no one has their phone on the table. Like it's getting back to like the basics of like relationship. Like And relationship is like at the foundation of like what we do in our business, right? Really try to hit that component pretty hard.
I love that,
in our
man.
spaces, man.
Yeah. Dude, I love that. I gotta comment on a couple of things there.
Yeah.
One, that's literally one of the reasons why I'm doing this. Because I'm speaking from a very selfish place right now, that it allows me this time to connect with you and with other people in this industry that I admire and I respect. Because if not, it's just what it is, man. It's like, it's in passing. It's a quick hello. We would have never had this conversation. Maybe we might have at one point, but I mean, it would be very unlikely that we would have had this hour-long space to talk about hospitality and each other and how we got into the industry. That's literally one of the reasons why I do it, because I really appreciate and value this connection. I mean, I don't have sponsors. We're not getting anything else out of this. You know, it's this.
Right.
And that's literally why I'm doing it right now. So the reason that the way that you brought that up is very meaningful to me. There's another thing that you said in there, which I think is really important. I want to address is that you said the responsibility that your team has to be able to enable this experience for others. I think that's a big thing too, because it's not just the responsibility, but it's also almost in part like the burden that we carry, because it's a lot, you know, day in and day out. You have to be at the top of your game and in a positive place to be able to offer something to people, or just be in a good place to receive people so that energy comes off on them, right? Like, you know, we've all been part of an experience where somebody wasn't in a good place, and it's again, not to put blame on anything, but it's just not the same experience. So we give so much. People give so much that are in the industry. You know, bartenders who are working 10-hour shifts and they're taking care of people in a great way. And they're so positive. I mean, I've spoken to so many people, and this is obviously opening up a can of worms for a whole other conversation, but just keeping your mental health solid, you know? Like it's very demanding. It's very demanding to be, you know, just, hey, how you doing? What do you want? Versus like in a good place to be like, hi, how you doing? We're so glad that you came here today. What can I get you? That's not always natural for people. Not everybody's just like that automatically. You know, you have to prime yourself and be in a good place. And I think that's, you know, you're almost like you're performing, right? A lot of times you are. I mean, not to say that you're being fake, but like you are putting yourself in the best place possible and trying to lead with the best foot forward to create the best experience for these people. That's why we're doing it. That's why we care about it. And I think that you know, I could talk about that a lot, but there's such a big mental health aspect. And I think we're seeing a lot more of that, where people are taking care of themselves more. I'm you know, this time around at the beginning of the year, I did a little stint of not drinking.
I did see that. Yeah,
for almost the first 3 months, and it was great. And you know, I definitely didn't do that when I was in the industry. Maybe we'd go a couple days here and there, maybe a week, maybe a sober October or something, you know, here and there, which I think happened once, you know, in 10 years that I was actually in the industry. But I think now that I was doing that, I'd also hearing a lot more conversations from other people about how they were doing a version of that on their own, because people are starting to realize they need to take care of themselves in order to be their best selves when they're working in this industry, which I love. I love hearing that conversation because I think it's very important. Because if not, you just kind of end up in this loop where you're giving so much and then maybe you're not taking care of yourself, and that kind of takes a toll on you as well.
100%. Yeah, no, I think that self-care, both this like physical self-care, but also like that mental self-care is so important, not just in this industry, right? Just in life, right? Life in general. And I love that perspective of, you know, we're on stage, right? I tell my team that all the time, right? I always draw Celine Dion when she had her residency in Las Vegas, right? She's going on stage 6 days a week, right? And she's delivering this like unbelievable Celine Dion performance 6 days a week, every single day, singing the exact same song. And how does she keep up that energy level, right? Like, how does she keep up that mental toughness when, you know, little Sabrina is coming from Ohio and she's never seen Celine, but that's been her life dream, her whole life. She flies into Vegas to see Celine, and Celine's already done that performance 3,000 times, right?
Right.
Because a lot of it is mindset. It is a privilege. It's like a privilege to perform that every night. It's a privilege to be part of people's lives, be on the floor every single night, to provide that for them. But you do also have to be able to take care of yourself too, right? You need that time away, that mental health, that physical health, to prioritize that. And I ultimately think it makes you a better employee. It makes you a better employer. And there's far more fruit done that way than burning yourself out.
Yeah. And to everybody out there who's doing that, thank you. Because it is such a special occasion and experience, just like the one that you were just describing, when all of that is done on point.
Right.
And you feel like you're in a welcoming environment, and you're in a very happy place to enjoy the time that you are with your people that you went there with. I love what you're talking about, because I know you were just in France also, but just how the attention is on enjoying each other's company versus being glued to your phones. And I know there's some restaurants that are doing that, right? Where you have to check your phone in. Dude, you should do like a no phone Thursdays or something. See how that comes in. No phones on Thursdays.
Maybe pioneer that out in
Temecula.
Man,
just give it a day. See how people respond. I love that. I love that. Just being more in the moment. I'm so guilty of that. I'm glued to this thing now too. And I'm just like really trying to be better at not being the case. I'm pretty good at it. What I do is like I reach a point, like I'll just eject out for the weekend. Then I go like to the mountains. I do a lot of that. I do a lot of hiking, and that's kind of my reset from all of this. But yeah, man, that was great. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Oh, absolutely, man. My pleasure.
I do want to mention one thing that there was so what I'm trying to do is a guest will leave a question for the next guest that's going to appear on the show.
Oh, okay.
So the last question was left by Mr. Zach Music. What's up, Zach?
Oh, Zach, no way.
Yeah.
Okay.
And his question was, I wonder if I should leave those anonymous or not. We'll do it next time. His question for the guest was, what is the thing that you're most passionate about right now in the industry? Whether it be a producer, we kind of started talking about producers that he was very excited about. So it could be that.
Yeah.
But what are you most passionate about right now in the industry? And then we're going to give you an opportunity to leave a question for the next guest as well.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think the thing that has always been like, I don't know, the thing that almost drives me, right? I feel like food and wine and travel is almost, it's almost just this product of the real thing, the why, right? Which is the relationship part. If I'm being very frank, that's the part that excites me. That's the part that drives me, because I feel like stronger relationships that you build with your team and with your community and with your guests, everything else just kind of flows from that, right? Like true wealth, right? True happiness, true wealth in this life is like finding those relationships, finding that contentment, right? And those are the things that like get me up in the morning. Those are the things that excite me, right? The beautiful wine, the beautiful food, the everything else that comes with it, right? The travel. Those are just byproducts of like having really strong relationships and being able to pour into those. And I think that's what we've tried to do. We haven't always been successful at it, if I'm being honest with you. But that will always be like our primary focus and vision moving forward is the people part.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. All right. Do you want to leave a question for the next guest? It'll probably be somebody who's tied to the hospitality industry, maybe with a wine focus, maybe not, but normally who comes on here?
Okay. Yeah. Let me think of it actually, because
I know I tried to put you on the spot. I didn't let you know that was going to be happening.
Yeah. Let me think. Yeah, where do you see our industry going? With rising inflation, right? With rising costs in food, with rising costs for wages, right? Where do you see the hospitality industry going, right? Do you see AI kind of implementing, its place very securely in our business, right? Or do you still feel like it'll very much be like a people business, right?
Yeah.
That's like a big conversation that I think needs to be had, right?
Definitely.
But yeah, I'd love to know more thoughts on that.
I love it.
Yeah.
Nate, I can't thank you enough, man. I really enjoyed this time together. We'll have to do it again sometime soon.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Really a pleasure even, being invited to the show. Been a fan of it for a long time. Love what you're doing for the industry, Raf, and for San Diego and even the greater San Diego area. Just a privilege and an honor even to be here.
I super appreciate it, man. The feeling's mutual.
Thanks, brother.
We'll see you soon.
All right.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, thank you.